It has just gone 2 o'clock, and this is Patco Mafani Conversations, and we're broadcasting actually universally, as we have viewers and admirers of the program who call us from different places around the globe watching this particular program. This is the only program around the world that takes one Bible character and go through that character and asks critical questions. God wants us to know about that character so we may know about him. And that show is Faith Heroes. And so we then take faith heroes, some of whom whose names have been bold and prominent in the Bible, but we also tackle faith heroes who are nameless, whose names are not seen in the Bible. Akhona amagorha njalo ke eBhayibhelini kuvele kuthiwe nje indoda eyayithe okanye umama owayenethombo legazi. Singamazi lo mama igama lakhe. And we hope one day when we get to eternity, Jesus will introduce us to those people and say, ladies and gentlemen, please meet the woman at the well. Sibe besingamazanga negama lakhe thina lo sisi wayengumvangeli omkhulu owaphela esithi yizani nizobona, come see a man. So there are many, trust me, there are many characters in the Bible that have shaped us, that have encouraged us, that have inspired us. This program, therefore, Faith Heroes, does just that, to get down to the Bible and study, carefully study, and pull out principles, pull out interpretations, pull out applications, so we can see how relevant it is for us today. My name is Patco Mafani on Faith Heroes. I am the host. Let me bring you the producer, Pastor Jabu Mapumulo. Shimane. Wenya.
Yes, Wayne.
It's good to have you again, man.
Yes, what a pleasure to be here today. It's a great afternoon, it's a great day, and I'm sure we're going to have a good time.
Lovely, lovely. And we're continuing with Rachel, by the way. We are on Rachel part 2.
Yes, for sure. We're doing Rachel, and last week was just too much fire in this story. I don't know how far we'll go today, but I know God has something for us in store.
There's someone saying, part reloading. Well, I think let us agree that you and I would never do justice to Rachel without these two ladies. Let me bring Sarahina Mayoyo. Hi, Sarahina.
My goodness. Molweni betunani, molweni ninjani.
Wonderful. Siapila Tina, we are under his wings, and we can see and we can hear from the way you're sounding. Uguti, now you're enjoying the grace.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation. Hey, Rachel. Yeah.
Agaglali sang? Okay, I'm going to bring in, thank you, Sarahina. Thanks for joining us again. I'm going to bring in Umama Malakalaka, Pastor Tataiso, Tataiso Malakalaka. She is with us again today. Hello, Tataiso.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mafani.
Thank you for joining us. And welcome. And I know that you are also itching, you are also burning to share with us some perhaps new or latest revelations about Rachel, about her father Laban, about her sister Leah, about her husband, whom she shares with her sister, her husband Jacob. So it's I don't know between generations or Muvango or whatever, but this is just another soapy. I've never seen a soapy like this. Getting into a house, and this house has this kind of a soapy, and we need to understand from the house of the soapy up there what the purpose was on this particular soapy. And I would love that, I propose that we begin with having a look at, marriage. And I'm going to allow Pastor Mapumulo to open the way. What is it that we see in Laban's house, Ngwenya? Where the only thing that we know, Tina, about marriage is that it is a holy institution of God. God gives one man, one wife. But in Laban's house, both her daughters are featured in a soapy environment, and it sometimes makes your blood goes like, when's the Gandoni up? And yet, God is here.
Yeah.
What is it? Just give us that that intro about marriage and everything that's happening in this house, and yet we see God.
Thanks, Ngwenya. Good afternoon to our listeners. Thank you very much for joining us. You are just starting now with another cliffhanger. I thought we were done away with cliffhangers. Marriage is God's institution. Let's start from there.
Yeah.
When God established marriage, he created Adam and Eve. That's it. So that's the model. That's the model. Now, but you read stories, you read the Bible, you find quite variations. Now, when you look at the story of Rachel, and particularly with in Laban's house, you can't talk in this story about one person and ignore others, because there are people who are intertwined with this story. You can't talk about Jacob's marriage without looking at his own parents, because it's his own parents that sent him to Laban's home, who is his uncle, and to get married there. Now, so you just wonder now, where is God in this? Because this is not God's plan. This is not God's ideal. This is not God's framework of marriage. Now this thing happens, but when you read, historically speaking, this was a norm during that day, that marriages could be arranged. 1, 2, that you could marry your cousin during those days. Now, whether that is right or wrong, we will talk about that and just share our views. And but it's worse that then, when you look at tradition, that Jacob wanted to marry Rachel, but a switch was done. And so, and then the following day, Jacob fights with his father-in-law about this. So you would then think that, okay, so let's return things where they should be. Take back your Leah and give me my Rachel, so that I can have what I wanted, so that I can represent what God wants to see in marriage. But it doesn't happen like that. He takes both. He says, well, you have given me the first one, I might as well stick with this one. Now, culture says a younger one could not marry before the elder one. So that means Jacob bought 2 for the price of 1. And this is where the whole thing now started. At least this was not Jacob's plan. That one must be clear. But he happens to get a deal that was stuck with him for the rest of his life. And that's why we take that story now.
Okay, I'm going to allow the ladies to run with the ball, particularly the ladies' aspect of sharing a husband. If the time saw you were Rachel and Sarahina you Leah, or vice versa, how How do you feel about this arrangement? 1, 2, could arranged marriages sort out society today? Could they give us better society today? Arranged marriages, was Jacob right? Was he entitled to continue with the younger one, though he's given the older one? You know, how do you perceive this whole thing, Tataiso?
All right, you asked a couple of things. So number one, I'm going to start at the top of my head. You asked if Jacob was right, and I'm thinking you're saying was he right with loving the one over the other, and also Rachel's stance regarding the relationship she has with her sister. I believe that Jacob has all the right to favor Rachel over Leah, because he never said he wanted Leah in the first place. I don't blame the man. And then now I'm coming to Rachel. I also do not blame the woman. I'm sorry if I'm sounding biased, but I do not blame the both of them. Another thing, I don't know Gutu Uleya Ukalelani.
Yes.
Because she knew very well what she was doing. I don't think she, because according to the Bible, it seems like there was a wedding and Rachel was part of this. After the first 7 years. And then the problem came when the midnight or whatever, when the lights turned off. And that's when the deception happened. And she knew very well what she was doing, Leah. And also, I think Rachel felt really betrayed, and the same way that Jacob felt betrayed. And another thing is that it's so funny that I don't know why the betrayal happens in the dark. I'm also thinking of how Isaac was in the dark. He was blind, and he was blindsided in the dark when he saw his son Jacob.
Yeah.
And now the very same Jacob in the dark now, who is blind. She smells like Rachel. She feels like Rachel. Mara. Rachel, karma is true. However, it's so unfair on Rachel, because Leah is like a thorn in Rachel's side, ne? And she is a thorn that prances. That thing. Okay, I honestly believe that they got to a point where they were enemies, because this thing. Women, we are territorial. I don't know if you get me. Women, we are territorial. These are my children. My husband. So I really think it became territorial. And Uleya, because God has now felt for the situation and has decided to bless her with children. I believe that Leah one and I'm sure she would hound her about this. But I want to run further. But before I run further, I want to take Sabina in this line, or where we currently are. Is there something you want to add before I move?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Leah or Rachel, depending on what we choose. Thank you, my sister. Jonga, we are being started in a very tricky position. So already we're talking about arranged marriage.
Yes.
And in the 21st century, being 21st century women and wives, Akho arranged marriage kandawo apha. As a 21st century woman, Mamela akho arranged marriage kandawo apha. This is not a conversation that we're having, because why are you choosing for me? And why do I not have the right to choose for myself? So in this era that we're in now, Tina, we're like, Jonga, this is not a conversation that we want to have. But historically, and even our own ancestors, that was their reality. For instance, my own grandmother, my paternal grandmother, there was a point where there was a husband chosen for her. And my grandmother, I take after her, she did not take it lying down like Leah. My grandmother, she ran out because she was like, oh, I'm not about to be Leah. Oh, I'm not talking about the Bible. Oh, Makulu ran away from that situation and she went and married someone she loved. So I'm speaking on the arranged marriage side of things, and I'm saying that it's quite a difficult conversation to have, because we are in a different era altogether. And our realities are quite different from the realities of Leah and Rachel. Now, when we come to Leah, I hear you, my sister, that Leah knew exactly what she was doing. But also, let's talk about culture. Let's talk about tradition and how sometimes tradition and culture can become women's worst enemies. You know, right now we talk about gender-based violence and how sometimes tradition and culture can also add on gender-based violence, because as mama, as women, as ladies, we get taught these notions of you must do, and to the point where you are not taught on how to use your brain. You are just given these rules. Valumlomo, sula, mnyamezela, you know, hlala phezu kwayo, do all these things. And yet we have to follow these things because it's tradition. When you don't follow them, you are going against tradition. And I think Ulia did not have the choice because it was tradition. She was probably sat down, what we are now, culturally, Rachel cannot get married before you. That lihlazo to this family. This is an embarrassment to our family. And as a result, to redeem your family, you have to do this. So I feel that she was caught between a rock and a hard place where maybe she didn't really want it, but culture told her she did not have a choice. Pastor Mapumulo, I want to go there to the, what did you say, 2 for the price of 1 for the, each man for the price of 1. Each one, each one is for the price of 1. Jacob bought 1 for the price of 2, and the second one was thrown in. That's how it went. Jacob bought 1 for the price of 2, and the other one was just thrown in. But now, if you remember, Tataiso last week said that Jacob was paying 14 years for Rachel, not for Leah. Leah umnikwa as a bonus, but now la 14 years I patalayo, we patalelo Rachel. Now,
right there, Sarahina, right there. No. Hang on. I don't want us to go past that, yes, because God does not see it like that. Lolia lo nguye ngona abantwana. La Rachel we 14 years unengxaki abantwana. From Ulia, 6 of the boys, 12 tribes of Judah are from Leah. So the way we see, and we know all of us in the studio and those that are watching now on television, it was a big deal, guys. It was a big deal. Umfazi ozala abantwana abethi indlu igcwale ngabantwana, and today it's Leah. Ngenye imini kwa-Elimeleki engupenina egeza phaya echolwana ngamehlo axa ejongwana amthole. And today we see the repeat of that. It's Leah today who culturally has an upper hand. Uzala bantwana. Later, much later, we learn that ababantwana bakaLeah were 50% of the boys who made the 12 tribes of Judah. Sure. Okay. Maybe it's one of those things that we will get answers for when we get to heaven.
Yeah.
Can I come
Yes.
in?
Okay. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think also we are going to touch on what we are talking about, because this speaks about God's controversial nature, how controversial God can be, because this is unfair. What you've just said now is very much unfair, as from the point of Rachel first, because now Rachel didn't do anything wrong. Uthandiwe. Rachel was loved by Jacob. She did not ask for this. So she was loved by Jacob. And then, right? She had nothing to do with this. Yet, why does it feel like she's being punished for it? Why does it feel like she must suffer now, as if when Zulia into yena, you know? And I think I don't want to because when we are laying out the character of God and how we can, as far as we confirm uThixo, we can never confirm uThixo because unendlela yokwenza yakhe. But andifuna ungena kakhulu kulena. I wanted to just finish on what I was saying earlier. Ukuthi, I want to come to men. Can I just come to men just for like 1 second? And I want to talk to choosing a wife, ne? Men and choosing a wife. Because Jacob, udibana no Rachel first time, and it was love at first sight, right? It was Bold and the Beautiful, Regent Brooke. Love at first sight. He sees her, he falls in love, and that was the end of it. Now, it amazes me that in the end of their story, at the conclusion of their story, it seems as though Leah is the wife that was chosen by God. At the end of the story, and now we are talking conclusion, it seems as though Leah was the one that God chose for him, yet Jacob chose for himself Rachel. And then we see what happens in the story. It seems like God is saying, Jacob I love. You know what he said, even with Jacob and his brother. Jacob I love. And it seems like God is saying without words in the story, Leah I love. Yes, I see when Jacob, you're choosing Rachel, but Leah I love. And I want to talk to men about choosing wives. Do you choose your wives according to your eyes, or do you consult God in choosing a wife for you?
Okay, that's a very interesting point that you're making there, because we now see God loving the unloved. Let me say this again. We now see God loving the unloved and God blessing the unloved. So that makes a very, 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 very interesting analogy. Okay, where do you love? The person that you love, that person favored by God. Have we got a antenna to see who is favored by God or not? You see, that's another thing. It makes it quite complicated. You get to a situation, you find this girl flying as Sabbath school superintendent. And you think, because she's flying as Sabbath school superintendent, you think that she's favored by God. So you marry her. And boy, you love her, but she's barren. And then this situation then compromises. The situation of culture brings in another one. Wrong. And then when you don't love Maqinase, but God blesses her. There's something about God. God is attracted to the unloved.
Yeah. Gwenya. You know, I think part of the lessons that are in this story is never box God's way of loving in any circumstance. Never define how God's love is exhibited to human beings, because God lives out of that box. He has many ways to demonstrate how much he loves. And therefore, when you look at this story, you begin to see a number of things. One of which is that, sometimes in life, you think you are the less blessed or not cared for by the Lord, only to discover that actually you are the one. But it's just that in the meantime, you are being prepared by God by taking you through the school of affliction so that you could be better placed or better prepared to deal with what God is going to take you through. The Bible says, Christ went through affliction so that he is enabled to save us. So you would think at face value that Leah was better off than Rachel. That is true to a certain extent from cultural perspective, because when you look at what Leah exhibited from cultural perspective, yes, he had an advantage over Rachel. But if you look long term, you begin to see that actually Rachel was not a disadvantage. When you look at problems of Rachel, those problems would have been a stumbling block spiritually for Rachel. So God had to allow him to go through the school of hard knocks to unearth the challenges that she had, whether it's emotional or mentally and spiritually, so that she can begin to see that jealousy has no place in the walk of life, because God has his own gifts for you that are good for you, for the path that you are working on, just as much as he has blessing for somebody else and so on. So let me give another practical example. Sometimes we think when you don't have money, you are not blessed as your next door who has money. But your next door may not have what you have. An example, health. You could be having good health. You may not have been going through the doctor. You could be having a good family life. You could be having a good marriage that somebody next door does not have. So therefore, never define a favor or blessings of God on the basis of where you are.
Wow. Okay. I need us to take just one step backward before we take many steps forward. And this step is about children. And ladies, I'm gonna give you the leeway now to run with this. Ladies, I'm gonna give you the leeway now to run with this. Having children and not having children in a marriage environment. Stigma or blessing? Stigma culturally and even with family. Is it ancient or is it still modern, this stigma? And we need to talk to somebody then about that, Ladies?
Tataiso. Is Tataiso in? Must I go in?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
She's muted. Okay, all right, okay. It's a sensitive one. The children one is a sensitive one, because even culturally, still today, it's still something that we esinyevulelana ngayo ezomama.
Yes.
We still sisakholana ezantsi ngendaba yabantwana, and you will hear how we even interact with each other. If you've been married for 3-5 years and you don't have children, some of the questions and the tones behind the questions will be and if you have one child, like me, you have one child who is now 14 years old, you can hear the tone in the question ukuthi hayibo umntana bekufanele banoko ngoku senomuntu adlala naye. But you can hear ukuthi in those questions, it's something that says hayi kaloku zibonakalise njengomama, zibonakalise njengomfazi ukuthi you can do this thing. And I'm actually, I love what Pastor Mapumulo just said now, ukuthi we need to define our own blessing according to ourselves, because it's custom made, it's very personal, it's not general, the way that God blesses us. So let me go and actually get deeper in this issue, Yabantwana, because perhaps really there's someone on this platform right now who is going through this. You know, for me, I've gone through an experience where I have been challenged when it comes to having children. And that is why I have a teenage daughter, and you know. And at some point, I felt God was being unfair, because also, culturally for me, I wanted to have a boy child. You know, I must give Mr. Mayoyo a son. And for me, for very long, I beat myself up for not being able to birth this son. But then I had to go through a process, and this is what Pastor Mapumulo is talking about, where Rachel also had to go through a refining process, where I remember being wheeled into a hospital bed and into theater and being told that I am going to lose my organs of being able to have children, which meant that this will be my only child, Joseph, and that is it for me. And I was going through so many challenges at that time, but how could God do this to me? He knows how much I want a son. But then I remember through the struggling, through the fighting with God, kwaphuma into ethi, Lord, it's okay. If you close my physical womb, it is okay. But make sure that you open my spiritual womb, because boy, am I going to give children in the spirit.
Yes, sir.
Boy, am I going to make sure that the enemy, in the physical, because now she's giving birth in the spirit realm. So I want to speak to a woman now who thinks her womanhood only depends on her physical womb, to say that Joseph wako, love that Joseph, but then ask God to open your other wombs and make sure that you give birth there.
Thank you.
Tatai, so you got to come in. Tatai, so you got to unmute yourself. So you come in. We are now dispelling, to all the ladies that are watching the show, we are dispelling the narrative or the notion that when you don't have children, or when you have one child, you are less blessed. We are dispelling that. We are dispelling. Tatai, so you coming in?
All right. I think, okay. Phew. I'm looking at the story of Rachel, ne? And then I'm gonna come with it from the story's perspective, and then I'll become general after, and I'll come to our day-to-day lives.
Yes.
So I remember, and I think Pastor Mapumulo alluded to this, that just because Rachel was struggling with having children doesn't necessarily mean that she wasn't blessed by God or less loved by God. Ne? I realized that in the Bible, the offspring usually that come as a result of barrenness, there is always something set apart about them. Like Joseph becomes the one who is set apart from his siblings. When you look at stories about Hannah, the child that came from that struggle becomes a prophet from the Lord. So I think that sometimes when God allows the barrenness, for example, to happen, it's drama, and God does it dramatically on purpose, so that when the child appears, the mother cannot attribute this miracle or this child to anyone else but say, Lord, it is a miracle. Yes. And as I was saying, usually set apart. And I was just about to say that just because it's not happening like a fairy tale, just because it's not the perfect love story, doesn't mean that God's hand is not over this marriage or is not
Yes.
over this situation. Because God seems to specialize with situations that in our human eyes, they seem like they are empty. They feel like they're barren. You know, when God created the world, it was empty, it was void, and God was saying, perfect. This is the raw material that I need in order to make abundance with it. God went to the widow and noon, and he was like, she was like, I have nothing. I am about to have my last meal. And God said, what do you have? And she said, I just have a little jar of oil. And he said, fetch those empty vessels. And out of those many empty vessels that she collected, an abundance of oil was created to the point that it was overflowing. So
Yes.
I just to be careful that sometimes we look at ourselves and think that we are in a barren situation or things are not going according to what we want. Continue. Is the raw material that God needs in order to make something extraordinary out of it. And then another thing. Remember last week I said we must be cognizant of the word that Rachel used. Rachel, when she saw that Leah was having a lot of children, she then becomes jealous. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 30, verse 1, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she became jealous of her sister. And she said to Jacob, give me children or else I die. And then Jacob's anger burned against Rachel and said, am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of your womb? But I want us to see something. Okay, another thing now. Can I quickly digress when I'm coming back?
Yes.
Remember Rebecca, Jacob's mother, was barren.
Yeah.
Remember what happened Rebecca's womb is that Isaac prayed for his wife.
Hey.
Sometimes we believe that this barrenness situation is that they supposed to deal with alone. But yet we are together. And I'm not going to get into the genetics these days just because that Deso is not having children. Sometimes genetically it's not only my problem. But all I'm saying is that it's times we both need to carry this yoke together. We both need to bring it to the foot of the cross and pray about it. And because Isaac had prayed for Rebecca, God gave them an abundance, two of the best. He gave them twins. Now I am coming to this, give me children or I die. Rachel was so desperate for children at that point in time that she was like, it's either you give me children or I give up on life. I think she was bordering depression.
Yeah.
And we get to the story, then we understand the wisdom of God. Are we aware that Rachel got Joseph first and things went well? But are we aware that when Rachel got to the second child, she named him Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow, because she could feel that now, because of this child, I am now going to leave this earth. I'm now going to die. So I'm just saying, sometimes God knows our life from the beginning until the end. And he knows that Belehi means in Setswana, the ability to have children. That Esau can only manage two of the best. And that God knows that for the second one, it will be the cause of your death. And God says, I will delay a couple of years, give you 20 years to enjoy with your husband, because I know when you get to the second one, it will be the end. But you spend the whole of those 20 years with no children, miserable, in sorrow, yet you were supposed to be in joy. Because God knows that real sorrow will come. You see, the thing that you want the most is actually the real thing that's going to cause you sorrow. But you've been so ungrateful. You've been blessed beyond measure, but you have been looking at the wrong thing. So sometimes God knows why not now. God knows why later on. But then we because of a lack of trust, we don't trust our Father that He has the best interest in our lives.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. Yeah.
Usara hina wenya udingi aircon pan
Please, defend. Oh, Pastor Mapumulo, okay, you have an eye. Defend. I'm going to jump a bit.
Please.
Yo,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And you know, there's a contrast. There's a beautiful contrast that I've picked up, and you know, between Jacob's love for Rachel and God's love for us. Jacob's love for Rachel and God's love for us. That's why in the city, Utiko is so controversial that in the same story, it can seem to us that, you know, he's controversial to himself, because I look at how Jacob loves Rachel. And I look at how Rachel is a representative of us in the story. So Rachel is a picture of us in the story. And God loves us so much. He loves us to the point that he paid with his life. Jacob paid 14 years for Rachel, but God paid with his life for us. And because of what God did for us, we are adopted into sonship. We are no longer his creation. We are his children. We are no longer servants anymore. We can approach the throne of grace with boldness. So the veil was cut when he paid for us. Umtshato wethu noThixo wenzeka because of the payment that he made. Yet many of us struggle to receive God's love, just like Rachel struggled to receive Jacob's love and rest in it. Many of us today are still struggling to believe that we are saved by grace. We still want to perform things. We still want to give birth to children first, so that we can prove that we can do these things that make us deserve the love. So like Rachel, who could not see that she was loved, who could not see that Jacob was crazy about her, who could not see that Jacob didn't care what she did and what she couldn't do. He just loved her purely. But like us today, who cannot see that God is crazy about us, God loves us. God was not he stirred up his own zeal to Isaiah. He decided to die for us. And we do today, we still struggle. We think that we have to buy his love through tithing. Yet tithing should be something we do because we are loved. We still think that when we give to the poor, when we do all these things, we are buying God's favor. And God says, no, you do these things because you are loved, because you are favored. And allow me to say that Islonda Rachel was deeper. Rachel was deeper. She thought that Islonda Sake would be healed with children. Just like many of us think that my marriage would be saved. Just like many of us think that my past issues, my past pain will be sorted when I get married. My past issues, my past pains and wounds will be sorted when I get that job, when I speak on that platform, when I write that book, then I will be redeemed. That was not the issue, because here God gives her Joseph, yet here God comes to say, okay, Lendo, that you are saying, if it happens, then you will be healed. Nancy, yet Rachel is still not content. Yet Rachel gives him the name, God will give me another. And it shows to us at times, God will do everything for us. God will answer all our prayers. and yet we will still struggle because our wounds are deeper. Allow me to say that many of us are walking around like Rachel, and we think our issues have been dealt with. We think our wounds have been covered because we got married. We think our wounds have been covered because we are CEOs of companies. We think our wounds have been covered because we have these children we've been crying about. And this Londa, discontentment in our lives is still there because here we are now having been given the things we have been asking God for, but we can't even appreciate these things because this Londa said to Sinzulu, Jongu Rachel, when they escape with her husband, with their family, when they escape Laban's house, and when they escape, Rachel decides to steal from her father's house. She steals her father's idols, and she runs with her husband away. We get married, but salandelwa zizinto zasemakhayeni ethu. Ndithi ndizotshata kwaMayoyo kodwa ndize nento zakwaNxumse kwaMayoyo. And what that means that umtshato wam is in trouble because utata wam will still have a say emtshatweni wam. Ingathi ndiyambona uJacob after escaping Laban saying, ndaze ndonwaba, ndaze ndaphumla, bilikithi wangena uLaban kwakhe. Inoba uJacob wathi yini Thixo? Yini madoda, are you trying to tell me that I will never ever be able to escape this man? Because Jacob doesn't understand. Tata zala wam uzothini kwami ngoku ndifunani lo tata? Kanti unkosikazi wakhe has carried izinto zakwaNxumse into the Mayoyo family, has carried ubumpondo bakhe into this new family. And jonga uLaban uyangena and let me tell you, many of us emitshatweni yethu usachakachela abazali bethu. Ubone ngendlela esithenga ngayo when we are buying furniture. Ubone ukuthi hayi manje le furniture ithulwe ngutata wakhe le. Le imoto is a car that her father would buy, which means that Lontu has moved from her home physically to marriage, but spiritually, mentally, and otherwise, usengumntana kowabo, kodwa utshatile ungumfazi. Nangu-ke uLaban engena ezowutshakatshela kwaJacob uzofuna into zakhe, uzofuna into zakwaLaban, uzofuna into zakwaNxumse kaloku. And then uRachel now, she does the very thing she hated about her father, trickery. What her father did to her and her sister. Guys, when we don't heal from the pain and the wounds and the issues that come from our background, Rachel does exactly the same thing as her father. She lies, she tricks. And don't you ever play with a woman. When a woman wants to get out of a sticky situation, she thinks very fast. And she's like, okay, and then yam, Rachel, and then Zibuyi Ngondo, at Manditilisha Lamadoda up. At I Zetlashe, man, and Boss Pagam, I can't get up that time of the month. She knew Uguti to get rid of men. Just say that. And as women, we know how we use that excuse to get rid of the men. When they are beating on our backs, we just say, "I'm man, red robot." Jacob no Laban, echudisu pumenyango. Le ntombazana ihleli phezu kwamabibi. Ebethuna abantu abahleli phezu kwezinto.
Can I
Jonga, listen, let me just close this one. Let me close this one. Omakoti, kabechata, abafazi kabechata bengomakoti, ngandiyambona uRachel uhlele ekhukhweni pha, ungathi ndiyambona ezothile pha ehlele ekhukhweni. And as a woman, you get told ukuthi jonga nxiba icakatho, wear this thing. And after you've worn this thing, hlala phezu kwamabibi elikhaya. Sit on the issues of this family, cover us. Umntana intombazana who grows up in a family with issues, and she comes to the elders to tell them that something was done to me. Sit on it, my baby. Sit on it and even lie about it. Don't embarrass the family, just sit on it.
Can I add some context?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, so you see the story about the stealing of the gods. I want to bring more research that I got from this. It's actually, I'm just adding a fun fact.
Yes.
So the reason why Rachel stole the gods, now to give a proper perspective, in Genesis chapter 31, when Jacob is now deciding that I am leaving your father Laban. So he speaks to his wife and he tells him that God says that it's now time for me to leave this mountain and to go to my father. And then he asks them if it's okay. And then Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 to 16 says, Rachel and Leah responded, that is fine with us. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth anyway. He has reduced our rights to those of foreign women. And after he saved us, he wasted the money you paid him for us. So meaning, he was supposed to keep Ilobola money. And it was supposed to be the inheritance of the daughters. But Laban Wai So it then says, all the wealth God had given you from our father legally belongs to us and our children. So go ahead and do whatever God has told you. So apparently, in the olden times, one of the things that were part of an inheritance to children was the gods of the family. Because it was that the gods of the family, like whatever trade you had, if you had cows and livestock, for example, the gods of the family were the things that made you wealth. So when Rachel saw that the father has squandered all their wealth and would even squandered their inheritance and their dowry money, she becomes like her husband. She is not a firstborn child. Leah is older, but she steals the family inheritance because there's no longer money. So the inheritance that is left is only the gods. And she was like, Leah doesn't deserve it, therefore it is mine. I'm giving you a fun fact.
Hey, Kosiam. Hey, Jesus. Developing again, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have Tatela, Rachel. We have Tatela. She's not waiting to be given anymore. She's like, Kudala's Katwa, hey, Kudala's Katwa about 5. Jesus. Kudala's Katwa, Rachel, Utin Yaitata. Yazithathela. But ke ngoku jonga ingxaki ezanayo laa nto Tatela. I think there was a mention here about revenge. There was a mention here about the deadliness of revenge and how revenge can come and bite us. Enjoy at a time where we're supposed to be enjoying peace in our families. Revenge, it's a dish best served cold. Now because now it comes back to her where her father is on her back and on her husband's back. Still, it did not work. So her avenging herself, her taking her own inheritance. One thing is that prodigal son, happy inheritance. When she took her inheritance, at the end of the day, it didn't work well for her. Very quickly, Rachel. You remember when Rachel asked for Reuben's mandrakes? There was a time when Rachel was still trying to get children and whatnot. She comes and she asks for Reuben's mandrakes. And mandrakes are like love apples. Ne? She asked for those. And I want us to look at this, Kukuchi, how we also sometimes fall for this trap because ufuna as love apples. So that is upper in this trying to get pregnant situation of hers. And that night, she was supposed to have her husband to herself. And because Ingakika Rachel had nothing to do with Jacob, Ingaka Rachel had everything to do with Rachel. Have him tonight. Because the busy because I'm trying to get pregnant here. And how many of us have found ourselves going to Osiavuma, looking for Muti to try and make what God only can do for us, to try and do that for ourselves. Love apples trying to force matters, trying to do only what God can do. If Singati Abba Maspagam saying, who have gone to Ruben to look for love apples, because sometimes it's like TikTok is taking too long. It's like sometimes because we've been waiting too long. We forget that TikTok doesn't operate like we do on this realm. God is not controlled by time. Does according to his realm and his time frame. There's not a point where it's too late. There's not a point where it's too late for God. So those that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up as eagles. And once bathi qwaka bonke abathethayo mamela ke ngoku sikhawuleze siyiqoshelise le nto. Yintoni ingxaki kaRachel? What is Rachel's deep wound? What is the problem with Rachel? I truly believe that it was a very personal issue. It was an issue that people could not see. You know those private issues that we have, those private wounds of ours. I think Rachel had a private wound and a private situation. And I think because Rachel could not heal from that private issue, which came from herself growing up even, because I think Rachel, I saw last week, Rachel, because she had all these favors and all these good things happening to her, the imposter syndrome was her biggest wound. Imposter syndrome, if it wasn't for this beauty of yours, and I think the imposter syndrome would always tell her, when you are a fraud, without these things that you use as physical, and because imposter syndrome, it makes you want to always prove it wrong. Rachel is that she kept on wanting to prove the imposter wrong. I can do it, and that's why she had to tick all the accomplishment boxes. The Ntombazana wanted to do everything. She wanted to ace everything. Man, they're good ebuhleni, man, they're good leadership, man, they're good ekubeni nabantwana, man, they're good ekuphangeleni. Yonke into mandiyenze ndedwa. Ingene ke yona igrace, ikupinge igrace, ithi now the reason why I'm here is to come and fill the shortage. Yabona le ndawo usilela kuyo yam. Suyizama ngokwakho mntanami yeke. And if i-imposter ithi kuwe uyasilela, vuma uthi unyanisile ndiyasilela, kodwa ukhona omnye. But God ukhona luzawungena ka-shortage yam. Kamsilelo wam, watch what God does in my shortage. That's what grace comes to do. Grace doesn't say, hayi wethu siyambona uyazama wethu, she has potential, masimzame. That's not grace. Grace comes to say, in spite of her shortage, she deserves favor. In spite of her shortage, she deserves blessing. And that is why you found Romans 5 as out, while we were still sinners, God through Christ died for us. Kangasilinde sibe potential. Usifele sisezinyukunyuku sinjalo. So today, abo bethu bafana no Rachel. Ndicela singafani no Rachel anymore. Let us heal from the imposter syndrome. Let us heal from the pains of the past. Let us heal from the wounds and allow God to show us what He can do. Because because she didn't heal, and she says, Ben Oni, she says, son of my sorrow, which was changed by the father to Benjamin. But she says she dies. Her last utterance is a cry. Her last utterance is hurt. Her last utterance is pain. And as a result, Rachel, I don't believe she rested in peace, because she dies between two places. She dies on the way. She dies along the way, caught between the present and the past. She never made a decision. She was still lingering in limbo. She didn't decide to put in their pambilina or in the She was in limbo. She was buried along the way. ungcwatywe endleleni ayinalo negama lendawo angcwatywe kuyo. And when we don't heal, when we don't choose the present, choose the future that God has for us, let go of the past. When we don't choose, sizazibhaqa sifela phakathi endleleni singakhange sifike, singakhange sibe nalapho sisuka khona. uLeah yena iphela sakhe story sisithi uLeah ungcwatywe nomyenakhe, because that woman at some point wavele wayekelela uLeah wathi, Lord, my vindication, godina wathi Thixo judge ngokubona kwakho enza intando yakho ngobomi bam. And as a result, look at her ending. Her ending is at a place iyaziwa indawo afele kuyo, ungcwatywa nomyeni wakhe. Jesus, my God.
Yeah. Yes.
Tata Isa? Mama.
Sarahina has wrapped it up nicely. That was powerful. And I think it really leads us to a conclusion now. That according to my observation, some things look like a mess.
Hey,
according to our human eyes, this is not supposed to happen. But it's interesting. I am going to the question you asked us, Padco. That how come God allows, or it looks like God specializes with messy situations. And I told us question too soon. Now we are getting to it. This conundrum needed to happen, because without this unhealthy competition of children, we wouldn't have the 12 tribes of Israel. God promised and said, your seed will multiply as many as the stars in the sky, as many as the stars in the sea. He didn't say it's going to happen in a romantic fairy tale manner. He didn't say it wasn't going to be sticky. He didn't say it was not going to be complicated. It was going to be drama and a half. That's why when God gives you a destiny, He doesn't say relax. God says be strong and courageous. See, you need when you're about to do something that is part of a destiny when it comes to God's things, you need strength, because there will be battles. It will be tough. It will be tough. You need to be courageous, because there are tools. Some of the things that God allows us to go through really shake our and need courage. So that God knew that if it was Rachel alone, the one that Jacob had chosen for himself, they would have only had 2 children, and that would have been the end. Where would the tribes of Israel be? Even Leah alone, biblically, she only had 4 children. And it is only after Rachel now started to give Bilhah, her servant, her husband, that Rachel was like, that Leah was like, hey, I I'm going to be left behind. I'm also going to bring my servant, my maid servant, so that the kids can multiply. And after the selling, Rachel sold her husband just like her brother in his birthright. And after that, God opened Leah's womb again after the 4 children. And she got 8 of the best under her belt. And Rachel got 4 of the under her belt. And so that's saying that sometimes we want to judge our lives like movies. Guys, the Bible is evident that it is a battlefield. And it's there to harm us, but also there's a reality that there are things that God allows, as we see in Job's life. But we know that whether He allows us to go through the fire, through the rain, whatever, at the end of the day, though, God, our story will end with God saying, God. But at the end, God gave him 20 more children. We cannot argue with God as well, because God will ask you, where were you when I created you? Where were you when I said that the ocean must not cross this line? So whether he allows us to go through the storm or whatever, let us trust that God knows what he's doing. But we will inherit the land. We will drink our honey, our land of milk and honey. We will arrive and we will have better skies, and it's fine. It's fine.
Hey.
Wow. Ladies.
You know, kunantilongibona la eti patri. I don't know what that means, but anyway, I'm not there. You know, there is some. I want to talk. I want to come home now.
Yes.
About Rachel.
Yes.
And say, you know, all of us are created by God for a purpose.
Correct.
All of us, without any exception. Now, that purpose is God's mission. That's what I define it. That purpose is God's mission. Now, what happens then is that in life, sometimes we never find or even look for God's mission, God's purpose. We never even ask ourselves exactly. If someone can ask you, what is your purpose in life? Why do you think God created you? And I can tell you, an average person will never tell you. And that's the sad truth. That's the sad truth. Now, what then happens is that we begin to chase other things, unknowingly, of course. And these things that we chase are called the shadow mission. God's mission, shadow mission.
Okay.
So this shadow mission, it looks good, it looks real, it looks exciting, it looks nice, but you know, at the end of the day, that thing is going to become your worst enemy. Now, this is where now it becomes critical for all of us to say, ask yourself today, as when we close shop today, and we are by yourself at home. Ask this personal question. You may have to ask it again tomorrow. You may have to ask God throughout the week. But ask the question, Lord, what is my purpose? Because when you don't know clearly God's purpose for your life, you will be running through life chasing shadow missions. And I'm saying this to say that Rachel did what she did because she never understood God's mission for her, even in that marriage. And therefore, she chased the shadow missions of trying to have babies, trying to compete with Leah and so on. And these are the things that we do to compete with other people, try to be like everybody, and so on and so on. And I'm saying to this, therefore, a shadow mission could be, for example, a television. Spend more time watching TV that has nothing to do with what God purposed you. A shadow mission could be anything in which your time is wasted, on which you are not productive. That's your shadow mission. And so I'm saying this to say, let's make it our purpose now to find God's purpose in our lives and say, Lord, help me that I be not like Rachel, looking at other layers around my life and waste my time of living in this life without having achieved the purpose for my existence. And that's what I want to close with on my part, to say, please, good people, find your purpose. Find your purpose. And God has the answer to that purpose. And let me tell you, any person who has a purpose has no time for other people. Has no time for other people. They can talk what they want to talk. You know what? You stay focused on your purpose. And when all is said and done, God comes through for you. And for some, it will take a day. For others, it takes a week. For others, it will take a year. But you know what? Make a fasting and prayer a mandate for yourself and say, you know what? I'm going to give my all to God and say, Lord, I want to see my purpose clearly. Because when you don't have, when your God's mission, your purpose is not clear to you, you end up in marriages that you're not supposed to be in.
Jesus.
You get things that you were looking for, but you are not content. And that is why you are not happy, not only with people, but you're not happy with yourself. So sometimes we get angry with people. We get upset with people. Why is this pain? But it's just that we don't understand. Listen, whenever you see someone who is troublesome, who is this, you must know that one is in a shadow mission. Is in a shadow mission. That one. So do what you can to help that person to find God's mission, to find God's purpose. And that is the challenge we want to leave you with today. Find your mission. Without your mission, you'll be focused on the layers. God bless you.
What is my purpose? I like where we ended. The ladies have demonstrated Miss Pelos ka Rachel Sabapina. Rachel wahoka. What it ezala because she had shortened her life. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, ladies. That I saw Sarahina. Thank you so much.
They're blessing ladies.
I mean, these ladies were on fire, man. They were on fire.
Thank you, ladies. You've been a great blessing for us. You've been a great blessing. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
May the Lord bless our ministries.
Yeah. I think we'll be inviting you quite soon, and I don't think we will afford to separate you.
No. No, that's what we like.
Yeah. In other words, just like God, we are attracted.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ladies. Sarahina, God bless you. God bless you. Pastor Tataiso Malakalaka, God bless you. God bless you indeed. Thank you so much. Okay. Do we know as yet next week? Do we know as yet?
Yes, we do. Next week is David encounter with Goliath.
Man.
David encounter with Goliath. That's what we are talking about next week.
Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a blessed, wonderful Sabbath afternoon and evening as well. Okay. Yes. God bless you. And to you that are watching from home, God bless you as well. It's been nice having you. And this is the Faith Heroes coming to an end on Patkama Family Conversations. Remember, on YouTube, please subscribe. On YouTube, make sure you subscribe. On Facebook, the Patkama Family Conversations page, do like us. The more we are, the merrier we will be. God bless you. See you next week.